Hey everyone, and welcome back. We're going to be doing a deep dive today that I think you'll find really interesting. It's all about coffee and tea and how they could affect your chances of getting head and neck cancers.
Sounds pretty intriguing,
It
right?
is. There's this new study out of the Cancer Journal.
Oh, yeah, I saw that. That was
Yeah.
a fascinating one.
Yeah, some of the stuff about decaf coffee was pretty wild, so let's get into it.
All right, so decaf was definitely a surprise. But first, I think it's important to get some context here. Head and neck cancers are, unfortunately, a big deal.
Yeah.
They're actually the seventh most common type of cancer globally.
Wow.
And we're actually seeing cases go up, especially in countries with, lower or middle incomes.
Okay, that definitely makes it clear why this research is so important. So what exactly did they look at in this study?
Well, they gathered data from 14 different studies, which is a lot.
Yeah.
And get this, over 25,000 people were involved. They looked at all their coffee and tea drinking habits, and then they compared that to whether or not those people developed cancer.
Oh, so this is an observational study. Gotcha.
Exactly. So we're talking about potential connections here, not necessarily saying one thing directly causes another.
I got it. Correlation, not causation. But still, that's a ton of people, so it's hard not to be interested.
Oh, we're sure.
So give me the highlights. What were some of the biggest takeaways?
Okay, so one of the most interesting findings was about caffeinated coffee. It seemed to be linked to a lower risk of certain head and neck cancers. People who drank more than 4 cups a day had a 17% lower risk overall.
17%. I mean, that doesn't sound huge, but
Well, when you compare it to other things people do to try to prevent cancer, it's actually pretty substantial.
that's true. Did they look at specific types of head and neck cancer?
Oh, yeah, they did.
Yeah.
So for those drinking more than 4 cups of caffeinated coffee a day, they saw a 30% lower risk of oral cavity cancer
Wow.
and a 22% lower risk of throat cancer.
Okay. Anything else?
And here's where it gets even more interesting. Drinking 3 to 4 cups a day was linked with a 41% lower risk of hypopharyngeal cancer.
Oh, I'm sorry. What?
Hypopharyngeal cancer. It's a cancer that develops at the bottom of your throat.
Okay.
It's not as common, but a 41% risk reduction is definitely something to take note of.
Yeah, 41% is definitely a big deal. So we're starting to see why everyone's talking about this study. But
Yeah.
what about that decaf stuff you mentioned at the beginning? What did they find out about that?
Okay, so here's the thing. Even drinking decaf coffee was linked with a 25% lower risk of oral cavity cancer.
Really?
Yeah. And remember, decaf doesn't have the same amount of caffeine as regular coffee. So
Okay.
that got the researchers thinking that there might be other stuff in coffee aside from caffeine that could be helping protect against cancer.
Oh, wow. So there might be even more to coffee than we realize.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've covered coffee, but what about tea? What did the research show about that?
Well, tea is where things get a little bit more complicated. Yeah, it seems like the amount of tea you drink really makes a difference.
How so?
Well, they found that drinking 1 cup of tea or less per day was linked with a 9% lower risk of head and neck cancer overall,
Okay.
and a 27% lower risk of that hypopharyngeal cancer we talked about.
Interesting.
But here's the catch. Drinking more than 1 cup per day was actually linked to a 38% higher risk of laryngeal cancer.
Whoa. Hold on. So drinking a little tea might be good, but drinking a lot might be bad.
Yeah, basically.
So laryngeal cancer, that's the one that affects your voice box, right?
That's the one.
Wow, so it seems like moderation is really key here, especially with tea.
You got it. These findings really highlight how complex this all is.
Yeah.
We need to figure out how different types of tea, how it's made, and how much people are drinking all factor into cancer risk. It's not as simple as just saying tea is good or tea is bad.
Yeah, there are definitely a lot of nuances to consider.
Definitely.
Yeah.
But I think it's really exciting to see that everyday things like drinking coffee or tea could potentially have such a big impact on our health. It really makes you think about how connected our lifestyle and our well-being are.
I agree. It's empowering to realize that we might have more control over our health than we think. So
Yeah.
what could explain all these connections between coffee and tea and cancer risk?
That's the million-dollar question.
What are the researchers thinking so far?
Well, the main thing they're focusing on is antioxidants.
Ah,
Coffee and tea, they're both loaded with antioxidants.
Yeah.
And,
right.
antioxidants are good at protecting your cells from damage,
Yeah.
including the kind of damage that can lead to cancer. But I got to say, we need a lot more research to really understand how these antioxidants are working,
Yeah, like are some antioxidants better than others? Does how you brew your coffee or tea affect how many antioxidants end up in your drink?
You're asking all the right questions. That's why scientists are so excited about this study. It's like they've opened up a whole new area to explore, and they're all eager to figure out how it all works.
Yeah.
It's like having the new puzzle piece,
Yeah.
and now they're trying to figure out where it fits.
I love that analogy. I can picture all these scientists in their labs, brewing up new experiments and crunching all this data.
I know, right?
So, what research directions are you most interested in seeing play out?
Well, I'm really curious about that whole decaf thing.
Yeah, me too.
If caffeine isn't the main factor, what else in coffee could be causing that 25% drop in oral cavity cancer? Is it one specific antioxidant? Or maybe it's a bunch of different things working together. Hopefully more research will give us those answers.
It is kind of a head scratcher, isn't it?
Totally.
But a good one. And what about the tea results? Like you said, drinking more than 1 cup a day was linked to a higher risk of laryngeal cancer, but drinking less seemed to be protective. How can researchers untangle all that?
Well, one idea is that the type of tea might matter. Different teas have different chemical makeups, different antioxidants. Like green tea, it's always getting praised for being so healthy.
Right.
But black tea might do things differently. So researchers could look into whether specific teas are connected to higher or lower risks for certain cancers.
Interesting. Couldn't how you brew the tea also make a difference?
Oh, absolutely.
Like the temperature of the water, how long you steep it for, even what kind of water you use, all that could change the final chemical makeup of the tea.
Yeah, for sure. And those are all things scientists can control in studies to see how they affect cancer risk.
Wow. There's just so much more to learn.
You're right.
Okay, but let's think about our listeners now. This study has some pretty big implications for things people do every day.
For sure.
What's the main thing you want people to take away from all this?
Well, I think it just shows us how much what we do every day can affect our health.
Yeah.
It's not about obsessing over every little thing we eat or drink.
Right.
It's more about realizing that even small choices, like what we choose to drink, can add up and make a difference in our overall well-being.
It's about taking charge of our own health.
Absolutely. Making informed choices, not just going along with whatever.
This study shows that even simple things like having a cup of coffee or tea could be part of a healthy lifestyle.
Exactly. But it also shows that moderation is important, especially with tea.
Right, right.
And as always, it's a good idea to talk to your doctor before you change your diet in any big way, especially if you have any health issues already.
Good advice. It's all about balance, right?
Yeah.
Enjoying things you love, but also making choices that will keep you healthy in the long run. I gotta say, I'm looking at my afternoon tea a little differently now.
That's what's so great about knowledge. It can change how we see things and help us make smarter decisions.
So true. Before we wrap up, I want to ask our listeners something. Knowing what we know now, how might you change your coffee or tea habits?
Yeah.
Will you have another cup, switch to decaf, or just keep doing what you're doing?
It's a good question to think about.
Yeah.
And as more research comes out, we can always revisit it and see what new things we've learned.
This has been a really interesting conversation. I've learned a lot.
Me too.
What's the one thing you really hope our listeners will remember from today?
I think the biggest thing to remember is this. What you do every day, it really does matter.
Yeah.
It's not about stressing over every single bite of food or sip of drink.
Right.
It's more about understanding that even those little choices, like what you're drinking, can build up and affect your health and how you feel overall.
It's about taking control of your own health, isn't it? Being in the driver's seat.
Exactly. And like we've seen in this study, even simple things like having some coffee or tea could actually be part of a healthy lifestyle.
Yeah. It's almost like we're getting permission to really savor those moments.
I like that. Permission to savor. That's a good way to think about it. And, this is just one study. It makes you wonder how this connects with all those other healthy habits like exercise, managing stress, eating a balanced diet.
You've hit on something really important there. It's not just about one thing in isolation. It's about the big picture.
Right. It's like all these healthy choices work together, create a lifestyle that supports your well-being on all these different levels. That's pretty powerful.
Absolutely. It's not about feeling restricted. It's about making choices that you can live with and that you enjoy. Who knows, maybe this research will even inspire some of our listeners to really get into coffee and tea, try different kinds, experiment with brewing methods, maybe even do some of their own little experiments at home.
I love that idea. The best way to learn is by getting your hands dirty, so to speak.
Absolutely. Well, this has been such an insightful conversation. I'm sure our listeners are feeling just as energized as I am about how much power we have to affect our own health with these simple choices.
It's been great talking about this with you and with everyone listening. And one more thing, like with any new scientific finding, this is just the start. I'm sure more research will keep coming out, shedding even more light on this fascinating link between what we eat and drink and how we thrive.
So, as we finish up this deep dive into coffee, tea, and their potential role in lowering the risk of cancer, let's raise a toast, whether it's with coffee, tea, or something else entirely, to the power of knowledge, to the thrill of discovery, and to the potential we all have to live healthier, happier lives. Stay curious, keep exploring, and keep those brains brewing. We'll see you next time.